So hello, hi. This is amazing, isn't it? This is like Las Vegas or something. I feel like I should be down amongst like the crowds, like working the crowd. You know, say, hey, I'll be here all night, try the veal, kind of thing. So hello, anyway, I should say hello, I'm Charlie, yes. So Mark did a wonderful introduction there, but I think he failed to mention the only real reason why I'm in these events is really because I just kind of get angry and talk about things a lot online. And there's a good reason for that, and that is because I've been in this industry for so long. I've been in this game for like 20 years now, and I've seen so many things come and go. And I've done so many jobs, you know. I've been a graphic designer, I've been a systems admin, I've gone out of the web completely and like cleaned hotel rooms for a living, and then come back in, and I find myself back in this whole wonderful world of the web. And as you can tell from my accent, I am British. But it's okay. I'm one of those nice British people who likes Europe. Yes, Europe! Woo! Yeah. Woo! Come on! Big hand for Europe! And that's why I live in the beautiful city of Berlin. Berlin is wonderful. It is like the most sophisticated place on earth. It's a place of gourmet food. You know, Michelin star quality restaurants. It's a place of privacy and restraint. And it's just so stereotypically German. You know, it's a really kind of like quiet and respectful place. And that's why I love it there. And in Berlin, I work for a company called Springer Nature. And you might not have heard about them. That's okay. And I'm the lead front-end developer in their Berlin department. And the reason you might not have heard about them is because they are a scientific publisher. You know, not many people here might be into science and, you know, the sciences, but it is actually one of the largest on the planet. Produces things like Biomed Central and Scientific American and the eponymous journal Nature. Which has got some serious pedigree, like serious. It's been around since, for what, 175 years now? So it's like proper old thing. And it is the most cited scientific journal on the planet. So if you get your name in there, your career is made. And it helps scientists to get their work seen by other scientists. I don't know why you're laughing. These are all real scientists. I Googled this. You know. This is real. But I'm not here to talk to you about science. I wish I was. I could absolutely make up so many facts about science on stage. But I'm actually here to talk to you about cake. Yeah, I heard some hisses in the audience there. Cake, ooh, controversial. And more specifically, I'm here to talk to you about how I made a cake for a bunch of my friends. Or I wanted to make a cake for a bunch of my friends, more accurately. And these are my friends here. That's Tom in the middle, Brooke Hilda on the right, and Nigel Susan on the left there. They're all my real friends. Please don't be in doubt about that. They're all real. You can see us here hanging around, having fun. I'm taking the pictures, obviously. That's why I'm not there. And I wanted to make them all happy, you see. I wanted to make them all happy because just as happy as they are looking at this photo, at this funny meme on their phone, because we've known each other for 10 years, 10 real years. And so I thought, I'll make them a cake. Make them a cake. What better way to do things? The thing is, them being a bunch of Berliners, I knew all about their food tolerances. You know, everyone in Berlin's got a food issue. Tom, for example, is a vegan. I think he had some kind of like traumatic incident in a slaughterhouse when he was younger. Can't consume the flesh of dead animals now, which I can't blame him for. And Rokhilda is absolutely lovely. She's wonderful, but she has got this like, severe gluten intolerance. So I thought, I'll do a compromise. I'll make a vegan cake, and I will make it gluten-free, and that'll be wonderful, won't it? Everyone will be so, so happy with that. I'll do a nice raspberry topping, and I'll put a peanut butter sauce on there. That's wonderful, isn't it? Every vegan cake ends up with a peanut butter sauce. The problem is, like to Susan, oh no, it turns out she's got a severe peanut allergy and will die if she eats my cake. It's always awkward when your baking kills people, isn't it? Absolutely awkward. I was like, shit, what the hell am I going to do? You know? How am I going to make a cake that's like tasty and edible and amazing? Was I about to have a failure cake? Was I about to have some awful thing happen? What I did next might surprise you, because I didn't make a cake at all. I said, fuck it, and just take everybody to a bar instead, and we'll have so much more fun. And they did. We loved it. We had a great time with me and my real friends. Please don't be in doubt about that. So why am I telling you about this? Well, the reason is, this is an example of a constraint. A real life constraint with my real friends. I could have been an arsehole in this situation. I could have said, well, I've planned to make a cake, and I'm just making that cake in the way I want to do it. And that would have satisfied me and my ego. You've seen that ego. But instead, I listened to people. And while I couldn't use the initial idea, I could go with the same feeling, which was to make something that made everybody happy and satisfied my need to make them happy. I operated within the constraints of the situation. And if this was a fancy Medium article, I could have phrased it about how I did cake development using context-specific research driven by an agile process that allowed me to generate new potentialities as new externalities arose. Or, if you're a normal person, you'd say how I was considerate to other people. You see, these constraints surround us all the time. We live in a world of constraints. From things like the physical properties of the universe, the warping of space-time, and the mass of the Earth, keeping you in your seats here. And even if you wanted to fly up out of your seats and float around the top of the room, you couldn't do that. That is a physical constraint. You know, it goes all the way through to social constraints, the social expectations and laws of our civilization. You should not murder, even though you can. You should not steal, even though you can. You should not turn around and slap the face of the person next to you, even though you can. And maybe you even want to, I don't know yet. Let's see how the day goes on. You should not do it. So again, why am I telling you this? I'm telling you because, like an angry dog, we keep seeing constraints as something that hold us back, that are a negative in our lives. When in fact, constraints are like one of the most amazing things ever and let us do wonderful stuff. For example, this is Professor Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, which I really hope I pronounced correctly. That is a very hard Hungarian name to say. And he is very, very famous for a concept called flow. He kind of systemized how flow worked and basically being in the moment. Did a lot of work in the 1970s. But he's also very famous for detailing how constraints affect creativity. Now, there's a very famous experiment he did where he took a group of students, a large group of senior art students, and he split them down the middle. The group, obviously, not the individual students. That would be a very different kind of talk I'd be doing here. And to one group of those students, he gave a literal easel and canvas and said, go away, start painting on that, and produce something wonderful and creative for me. And then to a second group of students, he gave exactly the same setup, you know, an easel and a canvas, except that he drew a mark on there, just a little squiggle on the canvas. And he said the same thing to them. He said, go away, create something wonderful for me. And then he brought in a group of judges, and he asked these judges to assess how each of these groups did. And this experiment repeated several times. And it turned out that each and every time, the group that received the squiggle on their canvas did better as judged by the judges, that's in the name, on how they produced art and made something creative and wonderful. The constraints of the start made more amazing work later on. Even our boy Nietzsche here, he loved the Greek poets, the ancient Greek poets. And he loved the way that they imposed constraints upon themselves. They set deliberate rules and then still created wonderful pieces of work. That which we call invention is always such a self-imposed fetter. He described this whole thing as dancing in chains. Somebody dancing beautifully while fettered with iron on their ankles. Ernest Hemingway, very famous, Old Man and the Sea and all that. He supposedly made a bet with some of his friends that he could write a story in just 6 words. Now, this is maybe true, maybe not true. It's one of those tales that circulates. But apparently he went away and he produced a 6-word story for his friends. This is the story. For sale. Baby shoes. Never worn. Isn't that heartbreaking? Isn't that evocative of so much? These 6 words did not constrain. They produced more and made more beauty come out of their story. And whether the whole story about Hemingway inventing this is true or not, we certainly know that around that time, this whole little genre emerged in the 1950s and 60s. So people had whole biographies of Roman generals encompassed in 6 words. People described what I hope is like a good life. They produce things that feel like personal attacks on serial procrastinators like myself. And depending upon how your mind is, either a story that is incredibly sad or incredibly filthy. It's really hard to determine. And it's not just like the recent people who've had these constrained techniques. Now, before this, we've had generations of literary formats that have constrained but produced more beautiful works. The haiku, an observation about a fleeting moment in nature, in the 575 syllable format. Those 3 lines and those 575 syllables don't constrain. They don't limit. They produce more, don't they? In the Francophone world, there was a group of musicians and writers who came together, and they formed something called the Oulipos movement, which, and forgive me any French speakers for my pronunciation here, stands for the Ouvroir de Littérature Potentielle, the workshop of potential literature. And they produced amazing things. They produced things called lipograms, which are pieces of textual work where a single letter is omitted. Can you imagine producing a novel, never ever using the letter E? They did that. And they, in fact, made the absence of that letter central to the entire story. Once again, a constraint didn't limit, it produced more. It produced more beauty out of it. Even the base limericks that we have, are constrained but still produce something more. Even compared to their grown-up sibling, the sonnets, they're so worthy. And the sonnets themselves, 14-line poems. Oh my God, in that, heartbeat rhythm, the iambic pentameter. Beautiful, constrained pieces of work that are still amazing. All of these constraints are beautiful and wonderful, and they give beauty and amazingness to the world. These constraints make things better. But when it comes to digital products, we tend to ignore constraints, especially on the web. There's the distinct feeling that if Csikszentmihalyi had given that canvas to a group of web developers or a web development team, they would have simply erased that mark off the canvas and complained that they were being stopped from doing what they wanted to do. When we design our products, we're falling into the same old traps we always have done, never acknowledging the constraints of the situation. We never acknowledge the constraint of our designs living in the browser, in the ever-changing and mutable browser. We still produce pixel-perfect designs that assume the best-case scenario, always incredibly idealized. We assume our forms will be filled in with people with normal names, air quote that one heavily, when things like Spanish format names don't fit in there easily. Or mononyms, single word names that are incredibly common in Southeast Asia. We produce designs that assume everyone has an Apple device, an iPad or iPhone or watch, and never anything else. And we assume all the people we put into our designs and mock-ups are beautiful, healthy, wonderful people without any kind of defects, because no ugly person would ever use our products, would they? Okay, I'm picking a little bit on designers there. So let's take a moment to pick on developers as well, because we have to consider our technical choices in all of this. The web attracts so many people because it's billed as having no limitations. That's part of the mystique of the Silicon Valley ethos, isn't it? That we're told we're knowledge workers, and physical limitations don't apply to anything, to geography or our skill set. It's the mind that's important. There's no constraints on the web. Do you want a new web server? Oh, just go on AWS and spin up a new instance. Start coding. It's all about you. It's all about boom, boom, boom. Ship it. Disruption. Disruption can fuck off. The web means we're free of these meat bodies, these corporeal forms, and we can just do whatever we want with our minds, yeah? Except this is, of course, all absolute bollocks. Developing things on the web has always been and always will be a constant negotiation with constraints. And this whole notion of disruption and ship it is founded on fundamental misconceptions. For example, any one device has so many variables in it. For example, if you're using a phone or a browser, you've got all the variables of operating system, memory, browser version, display size, display type, display orientation, network type, network quality, input method, CPU power, device type, sensors, user settings, what extensions are installed, are they full screen, is everything even working, and so on and so on and so on, in any one device. When scaled up, imagine the billions and trillions of devices out there, multiply that by all these variables. You have effective infinity. It's the same when it comes to humans themselves. There's so many combinations of human traits and situations. A person's cognition and intellect and education and perception. Can they use their hands? Can they move their hands? Can they see? How well can they see? Where are they? What are they doing? Are they distracted? Do they have the ability to concentrate? So on and so on and so on. Again, effectively, infinite combinations of human traits. And these two things become the primary constraints when developing for the web. That there is infinite technology and infinite variations of humanity. And that is from which everything else comes, from which all of our work emerges. And yet, we ignore them. And we offer up so many excuses. Designers say, oh, but the business wants it designed this way and we can't interfere with things. Developers say, well, the designers gave me that mock-up and I have to implement it like they said, you know? We produce our pixel-perfect designs using our favorite tools, and we develop our apps using whatever the fancy framework of the week is. This is where the cardinal sins of our industry emerge. We ignore user constraints and the technology that people have. And we build complex solutions that assume so much. And we never dare to question it. And if you do, developers, for example, get very, very nervous because we've built our entire industry around the complex. And instead of acknowledging the diversity of humanity and the constraints of that, of having infinite human variations, we put our teams, designers and developers first. And we try to justify why they get to ignore things like accessibility. And you'll hear people saying things like, oh, well, we don't actually have any disabled users. I checked. Oh, disabled people don't buy our products, actually. This is despite 15% of any population having some kind of disability, officially. WHO report on that. 50% of over 65s in America have arthritis and find it painful to use any of our devices. Despite the fact that 10% of people with XY sex chromosome in this room have a disability. You do. Color blindness. It's a disability. We never think of it like that. Disabilities are common and prevalent. We write them off and we say, so, by the way, if you don't see number 12 in there, get an eye test immediately. We write them off and we say things like, oh, disability, no, we don't develop for them. That's just for people who are blind and deaf and paralyzed and in a wheelchair. And really, they don't buy our products. That's what disability is. And we ignore the reality of things, the constraints of developing for them. And even when it is accepted, you know, we say things like, well, we can't expect devs to know about accessibility. Despite everyone apparently being a full-stack developer, the not-so-full-stack is to actually go and learn how accessibility works. This kind of thinking is reductionist and ableist, and it's severely restricted. Because when we ignore those constraints, they still exist. And we just simply end up hurting our users. And what could have been a force for creativity, for building incredible things, ends up becoming an excuse for thinking firmly inside the box and producing things the same old way. We have got to get better than this. Because we're like children, aren't we, in many ways? Children enjoying the whole marshmallow test experiment. You know, the ability to defer your short-term impulses for long-term, better gains. We're dreadful as an industry at long-term thinking. No, maybe it's a flaw in our species. Or maybe that's just writing off things because it happens with biology. I don't believe that at all. I think this is a cultural problem. And this flaw means that we're happy to ignore constraints because we think there is no immediate effect. And so we just build up these problems continuously. Because another flaw in our culture that lies alongside that is that we find it so easy to rescind empathy from people, especially if they're not like us or near us in some way. We find it so easy to claim that no one is being harmed, but someone always will be. Because like in physics, the conservation of mass equation here, there is a similar law of constraint debt. I can only phrase it like that. If you ignore constraints, there is a price, there is a debt that will build up. If you ignore those two primary constraints, a price builds up, and it will have to be paid off by someone. And it's rarely paid off by us. Us lovely designers and developers. It's paid off by other people, and those other people are always the users, every single time. The real users, not those ones we imagine in our head, those beautiful looking ones with perfect teeth. It's always real users, everyday people like us. The people with broken and shitty devices like this, honestly, go on the Berlin U-Bahn. This is so common, it's unbelievable. I don't know what it's like here. I've had this myself, trying to use a device and your fingers are bleeding as you're scrolling through the screens. Really, honestly, because I could not afford at the time to upgrade that device. It's people with low CPU devices in network poor areas. They're the ones who end up getting hurt when we dump huge amounts of client-side code into the browser, when we push megabytes of JavaScript down the pipe and expect their old shitty device to suddenly uncompress and run all this code that works amazingly on our iPhones, our iPhone 10s that we have, but for some reason doesn't work on a $50 device. The people who can't afford the latest laptop, because amazingly, not everyone gets given a new laptop every year by their employer like we do. Most people have to go out and buy these things. The price is paid by people with disabilities and people in difficult situations. We're dumping it all onto them because we're ignoring constraints. And in fact, maybe dumping is the perfect analogy here, because I've got the feeling now we've become the dirty industry, dumping our toxic waste into the world, into the rivers and lakes of our organization because we ignore constraints. We're the oil barons, happily lording it up while the planet burns. That's what we are. We need to be better than this. We need to fix things. And when I say be better, maybe you think I'm saying, well, you just want to do everything in Comic Sans, don't you? And make it beige and just do it in HTML and that's it. And why are you restricting me, Charlie? For God's sake, don't restrict me. And if you think I'm saying that kind of thing, then maybe you're hearing me wrong. Because I'm talking about taking these initial constraints and using them to inspire us, to be our muses, our musi, our musely, whatever the fucking plural of muse is. And in the process, make us better designers and developers. I'm talking about making things that are universal and beautiful in design. Those two things are not mutually exclusive. There's a false dichotomy that has been set up by some mysterious force in our industry. I'm talking about making the essentials at the core of everything. And us learning to just stop adding stuff because we want to add things for the fun. I'm talking about the word elegance. Where have our elegant products gone? Not complexity for the sake of complexity. I want us to enact the original goal of the web. So Tim, he knew what he was on about. Think of the good that we could do if we started producing universal and performant and efficient products from the start. Things that could work on anything and don't require us to upgrade. Oh, you can't use my website. I'm so sorry. Just go and upgrade your phone and help the planet burn just that little bit more. Oh, but my boss won't let me do it. I don't care what your boss says. Your boss is a fucking idiot. That's what he is. If your boss thinks that ignoring the realities, the constraints of a situation is what sells, if you think making things more complex is what sells, then you shouldn't be doing that job. Nobody comes out of business school saying, well, yes, actually, I think I'll make things as complex as possible and I'll make the workers get paid as much as possible and that's what will be efficient. Yes, and immediately fail. I used to think that having these user constraints and late-stage consumer capitalism were somehow never aligned on this. It was impossible to match them up. But the thing is, I was wrong on that. I was absolutely wrong. Because let's think about it. Capitalism wants us to produce things quickly. It wants us to produce them as cheaply as possible. And it wants us to sell them to as many people as possible. Wait a minute. That is what I've just been stood on stage for the last 30 minutes ranting to you about, isn't it? They are aligned on this. Both of them want to deliver things fast. The users want frequent updates and nice things come down. And consumer capitalism wants us to innovate quickly, yeah? So we could deliver the essentials first and enhance them there. Do true iteration that we supposedly do, but I've never actually seen enacted anywhere. Both want things that work for as many people as possible. Users want to do stuff no matter where or what condition they're in. Consumer capitalism wants to sell to as many people as possible. So progressively enhance things. Start from the basics and work your way up so that you have something that works for anybody in any situation. Make it accessible from the start. What's so hard about this? And both of them want us to deliver it cheaply. Users don't want to pay the price on their device and network, and consumer capitalism wants to build things cheaply. Oh wait, this is where it kind of falls down, isn't it? Because have you seen the wages for developers and designers in this industry? We somehow get paid more than doctors. What is that about? I'm just going to say .com bubble 2.0 coming your way soon. And this is despite devs being too expensive for what we actually give to the world. And yes, I do think that. Consumer capitalism is compatible with these two core constraints that we have. It honestly is. Users want simple things. They want to just achieve their core goals. And consumer capitalism wants cheap, simple shit that it can sell to the masses. Or if you're Apple, expensive, simple shit. So who is asking us to make things more complex? Who's asking us to stuff more things in there and make it harder for users to use our products? It's not our software processes or anything like that. They say acknowledge constraints and be lean and do the minimum necessary. It's not our design leaders. They're all about, design thinking and lean UX and do the minimum necessary and think about the user and do research and iterate. And it's definitely not the users. No end user is asking, oh, please use more technology. Yes, I would love it if you assumed I have an iPhone X. Why not? I'm swimming in €1,000 I can blow on that one. Please, yes, assume I have 4G and Wi-Fi all the time. Please. Despite the fact I'm on the U-Bahn most of the time and the connection is shitty down there. So if it isn't capitalism, if it isn't consumer capitalism, or our industry leaders, or the users, who is asking to do this? What force is causing us to make the web worse for people? It turns out it's us. We're the bad guys. We are guilty of following the big boys and just doing what they're doing because they're the cool ones. We're the ones who are guilty of not daring to say no and pushing back on things. We are the ones who are ignoring those core constraints and so many others left, right, and center. We need to get better and consider the users in everything, the user constraints in every decision. No matter if it's a bit boring and you don't like doing that work, you still have to do it. No matter if it takes time away from our latest frameworks and fun, you've still got to do it. It means being grown-ups and doing this stuff. Because, let's face it, our industry has taken a bit of a turn to the bad, hasn't it? It's become more conservative and a bit more self-serving, and let's face it, a bit more right-wing. We need to kick our industry up the arse because our Silicon Valley culture has given us Nazis on social media, harassment against minority groups becoming the norm, an industry that promotes a fucking currency that deliberately burns energy. My God. An industry that has enabled genocide. Literally enabled genocide. We have got to be better than this, and let's face it, that is a pretty fucking low bar, not enabling genocide. Acceptance criteria. Did I enable genocide? Yes or no? We need to make these two fundamental core constraints of the web to be at the core of everything that we do. We've got the skills and the techniques to do this. This is all documented. This isn't new. We've got the ability to do it. We've just got to take these technologies and use them. We can do so much better. I honestly believe this. We have the capability to be better at this. I know we do. Look at all you beautiful people in this room. I know each and every one of you is capable of something like this. We just need the courage to do it. That's all. To stand up and to say no to people when they say, well, we don't need to do accessibility, we'll do that at the end in the next sprint. Do it now. Be brave. Stand up, do this stuff. Care for people. Ask, does this hurt people in some way? Could this tool be used to hurt people online? What is the way that this could be used to harass someone or make their lives worse? These are simple questions that we can ask, and it's so easy to do. Because imagine if we were strong and we embraced this challenge. If we walked into the fire of all this. If we weren't cowards on it, but instead were brave and stood up and did the right thing. Because how we respond to these constraints, how we react in this situation, it defines our humanity. It defines us as people. So as you go through this event today, I want you to consider these things and think about it. Each and every time, how can this be used to make the world better and embrace the constraints of the web and the constraints of any situation you're in? How can it make things better? I'm pretty sure that we're up to that challenge. I know we are. Thank you.